continuing where I left off. Once a space on the open ground was cleared, the combatants ran forward, hurling spears at a distance first, then closing hand to hand. Their brazen shields and harness rang. The earth groaned under them, redoubling stroke on stroke. They fought with swords, and prowess merged with luck in the fighting power of each. On Scylla's flank of mighty mountain, or Tarbinus's height, when two bulls lower heads and horns in charge in deadly combat, herdsmen blanch and scatter, then cattle all stand mute, as heifers mused on a new forest lord, whom all herds would follow. The contenders, compact of shocking force, with lower horns, gored one another, bathing necks and humps in sheets of blood, and the whole woodland bellows. Just so Trojan Aeneid and the hero son of Daunus, battering shield on shield, fought with a din that filled the air of heaven. Jupiter held the two pans of a scale, and balanced and placed in each the destiny. Doom for him whose weight would bring death down. Turnus, thinking himself secured, flashed out to his full height, blade lifted overhead, and struck. The Trojans and the anxious lanterns raised the cry, both ranks of men on edge. But then the treacherous blade on impact broke, and left the men undone, enraged, his one recourse in flight. Swifter than wind he fled, and stared at the strange sword hilt in his hand, disarmed now. Legend tells that when he first stepped up behind his team for headlong combat, haste made him leave his father's blade behind, and snatched out of his charioteer, Metiscus. This for a long time has sufficed, while he rode down the Trojan stragglers from behind. But now, encountering the armor forged by the god Vulcan, the mere mortal blade snapped into fragments like an icicle, and shattered bits shone on the yellow sand. Crazed by the loss, in search of open ground, Turnus ran, weaving circles at a loss, this way and that, for the dense crowd of Trojans ringed and shut him in, and on one side a broad marsh, on the other high stone walls made limits to his flight. As for Aeneid, slow through his knees were by the arrow wound that hampered him at times, cutting his speed. He pressed on hotly, matching stride for stride behind his shaken foe, as when a staghound corners a stag blocked by a stream, or by alarmed at a barrier of crimson feathers, strung by beaters. Then the dog assails him with darting, barking runs. The stag, in fear of nets and high river bank, attempts to flee, and flee again 1,000 ways, but, packed with power, the Umbrian hound hangs on, muzzle agape. Now he has him, now, as though he had him, snaps eluded jaws, and bites on empty air. Then he gives tongue, in furious barking. River banks and pools echo the din, reverberant to the sky. As Turnus ran, he raged at Rutulians, calling their names, demanding his own sword. Aeneid countered, threatening instant death for any who came near. He terrified them, promising demolition of their city, and pressed the chase despite his wound. 5 times they ran the circular track, and 5 again re-ran it backward, this way and now that. They raced for no light garland of the games, but strove to win the life and blood of Turnus. Now on this field there happened to have stood an old wild olive, bitter leaf, a tree sacred to Faunus, with a trunk revered by seamen long ago. Those who survived, shipwrecked or stormed, fixed votive offerings there, and hung their garments to Laurentum's god. The Trojans, treating it like any other, had left a stump, but lopped away the tree, so they could fight on a clear field. The spear, thrown by Aeneid, had stuck in that tough stump, where winging force had carried it and held it. The Dardan beat to extract the weapon now, and cast it at the man he could not catch. At this Turnus grew mad with fear, and said, Faunus, have pity, I entreat you. Gracious earth, hold fast the steel. If I have honored you all my life, whereas Aeneas men warred on you and profaned you. So he prayed and asked divine assistance, not in vain, for pausing at the stump and struggling long, Aeneas, using all his power, could not pry apart the bite of stubborn oak. As bitterly he braced and strove, Juturna ran up once again, chains to Metiscus, giving her brother back his sword. At this, indignant that the nymph had made so free, Venus came forward, and she tore away Aeneas' weapons from the deep oak root. So both men were rearmed. They towered up, one confident of his own blade, the other tall and savage with a spear to throw, and both now, panting, faced the duel of Mars. Omnipotent Olympus' king, meanwhile, had words for Juno. As she watched the combat out of a golden cloud, he said, "My consort, what will the end be? What is left for you? You yourself know, and say you know. Aeneas, born for heaven, totality of this land, by fate to be translated to the stars. What do you plan? What are you hoping for? Keeping your seat apart in the cold clouds. Fitting, was it, that a mortal archer wound an immortal, that a blade let slip should be restored to Turnus, and new force accrued to a beaten man. Without your help, what could Juturna do? Come now, at last have done, and heed our pleading, and give way. Let yourself no longer be consumed, without relief by all that inward burning. Let care and trouble not forever come to me from your sweet lips. The finish is at hand. You have the power to harry men of Troy, by land and sea, to light the fires of war, beyond belief, to scar a family, with mourning before marriage. I forbid your going further." So spoke Jupiter, and with a downcast look Juno replied, "Because I know is your will indeed, great Jupiter, I left the earth below, though sore at heart, and left the side of Turnus. Were it not so, you would not see me here, suffering all that passes, here alone, resting on air. I should be armed in flames at the very battle line, dragging the Trojans into a deadly action. I persuaded Juturna, I confess, to help her brother in his hard lot, and I approve her daring greater difficulties to save his life, but not that she should fight with bow and arrow. This I swear by Styx' great fountainhead, inexorable, which high gods hold in awe. I yield now, and for all my hatred leave this battlefield. But one thing not retained by fate I beg for Latium, for the future greatness of your kin, when presently they crown peace with a happy wedding day. So let it be, and merge their laws and treaties. Never command the land's own Latin folk to change their own name to become new Trojans, known as Teucrians. Never make them alter dialect or dress. Let Latium be. Let there be Alban kings for generations, and let Italian valor be the strength of Rome in after times. Once and for all Troy fell, and with her name let her lie fallen. The author of men and the world reply with a half smile, Sister of Jupiter, indeed you are, and Saturn's other child, to feel such anger storming in your breast. But come, no need, put down this fit of rage. I grant your wish, I yield, I am won over willingly. Ausonian folk will keep their father's language and their ways of life, and that being so, their name. The Teucrians will mingle and be submerged, incorporated. Rituals and observances of theirs I'll add, but make them Latin, one in speech. The race to come, mix with Ausonian blood, will outdo men and gods in its devotion. You shall see, and no nation on earth will honor and worship you so faithfully." To all this Juno nodded in assent, and gladdened by his promise, changed her mind. Then she withdrew from sky and cloud. That done, the father set about a second plan, to take Juturna from her warring brother. Stories are told of twin fiends called the Dirae, whom with hell's Marjorie deep night bore in one birth. She entwined their heads with coils of snakes and gave them wings to race the wind. Before Jove's throne, a step from the cruel king, these twine attend him and gave piercing fear to ill mankind. When he who rules the gods deals out appalling death and pestilence, or war to terrify our wicked cities, Jove now dispatched one of these swift from heaven, bidding her to be an omen to Juturna. Down she flew in a whirlwind borne to earth, just like an arrow driven through a cloud. From a taut string, an arrow armed with gall of deadly poison, shot by Parthian, a Parthian or a Cretan, for a wound immedicable. Whizzing, unforeseen, it goes through racing shadows, so the spawn of night went diving downward to the earth. On seeing Trojan troops drawn up in face of Turnus' army, she took on at once the shape of that small bird that perches late at night on tombs or desolate rooftops, and troubles darkness with a gruesome song. Shrunk to that form, the fiend in Turnus' face went screeching, flitting to and fro, and beating with her wings against his shield. Unstrung by numbness, faint and strange, he felt his hackles rise, his voice choked in his throat. As for Juturna, when she knew the wings, the shriek to be the fiend's, she tore her hair, despairing. Then she fell upon her cheeks, with nails upon her breasts, with clenched hands. Turnus, how can your sister help you now? With what action is still open to me? Soldierly though I have been, can I, by any skill, hold daylight for you? Can I meet and turn this deadliness away? Now I withdraw, now leave this war. Indestined birds, I fear you. Spare me your terror. Whiplash of your wings, I recognize that ghastly sound, and guess great-hearted Jupiter's high, cruel commands. Returns for my virginity are they. He gave me life eternal. To what end? What has mortality been taken from me? Why has mortality been taken from me? Now, beyond question, I put a term to all my pain, and go with my poor brother into the darkness, his companion there. Never to die? Will any brook of mine without you, brother, still be sweet to me? If only earth's abyss were wide enough to take me downward, goddess though I am, to join the shades below. So she lamented. Then with a long sigh, covering up her head in grey mantle, sank to the river's depth. Aeneas moved against his enemy, and shook his heavy pine tree spear. He called from his hot heart, Rearm now! Why so slow? Why even now fall back? The contest here is not a race, but fighting to the death with spear and sword. Take on all shapes they are, summon up all your nerve and skill. Choose any footing, fly among the stars, or hide in cavern earth. The other shook his head, saying, I do not fear your taunting fury, arrogant prince. It is the gods I fear, and Jove my enemy. He said no more, but looked around him. Then he saw a stone, enormous, ancient, set up there to prevent landowners' quarrels. Even a dozen picked men, such as the earth produces in our day, could barely lift and shoulder it. He swooped and wrenched it free in one hand, then rose up to his heroic height, ran a few steps, and tried to hurl the stone against his foe. But as he bent, and as he ran, and as he hefted and propelled the weight, he did not know himself. His knees gave way, his blood ran cold and froze. The stone itself, tumbling through space, fell short and had no impact. Just as in dreams, when the night swoon of sleep weighs on our eyes, it seems we try in vain to keep on running, try with all our might, but in the midst of effort faint and fail. Our tongue is powerless. Familiar strength will not hold up our body, not a sound, a word will come. Just so with Turnus now. However bravely he made shift to fight, the immortal fiend blocked and frustrated him. Flurrying images passed through his mind. He gazed at the Rutilians and beyond them, gazed at the city, hesitant in dread. He trembled now before the poised spear shaft, and saw no way to escape. He had no force with which to close or reach his foe, no chariot and no sign of the charioteer, his sister. At a dead loss he stood. Aeneas made his deadly spear flash in the sun, and aimed it, narrowing his eyes for a lucky hit. Then, distant still, he put his body's might into the cast. Never a stone that soared from a wall-bathering catapult went humming, loud as this, nor with so great a crack burst ever a bolt of lightning. It flew on like a black whirlwind, bringing devastation, pierced with a crash the rim of sevenfold shield, cleared the cuirass edge, and then passed clean through the middle of Turnus' thigh. Force of the blow brought the huge man to earth, his knees buckling, and a groan swept the Rutulians as they rose, a groan heard echoing on all sides from all the mountain range, and echoed by the forest. The man brought down, brought low, lifted his eyes, and held his right hand to make his plea. Clearly I earned this, and I ask no quarter. Make the most of your good fortune here, if you can feel a father's grief, and you, too, had such a father in Anchises, then let me bespeak your mercy for old age in Danis, and return me, or my body, strip if you will, of life to my own kin. You have defeated me. The Orsanians have seen me in defeat, spreading my hands. Lavinia is your bride, but go no further out of hatred. Fierce on their arms, Aeneas looked to and fro and towered, and stayed his hand upon the sword hilt. Moment by moment now, what Turnus said began to bring him round from indecision. Then to his glance appeared the accursed sword belt surmounting Turnus' shoulder, shining with its familiar studs. The strap young Pallas wore Turnus wounded him, and left him dead upon the field. Now Turnus bore the enemy token on his shoulder, enemy steel. For when the sight came home to him, Aeneas raged at the relic of his anguish, worn by this man as trophy. Blazing up and terrible in his anger, he called out, "You in your plunder, torn from one of mine, shall I be robbed of you? This wound will come from Pallas. Pallas makes this offering, and from your criminal blood exacts his due." He sank his blade in fury in Turnus' chest, then all the body slackened in death's chill, and with a groan from that indignity, his spirit fled into the gloom below. And that is it for the Aeneid by Virgil, translated by Robert F. Fitzgerald. Thank you for watching this series. It was really a pleasure, and I got to learn a lot how to read and the poetry of old classic poetry. Please give it a thumbs up, a thumbs down, leave a comment below, subscribe, or watch all the videos, or leave a comment and tell me what you thought of the whole series. And I think I'm going to start working on, I believe I was going to say in my last video, if you're watching, I'm going to be working on reading another one, and I got inspired by Mary Shelley reading Frankenstein, and in it she mentions a book, and I would definitely like it. It sounds poetic. I believe it's called Paradise Lost by Milton, and I think I'll start reading that series soon. So see you in the next one. Bye.